everyone. My name is Kate Wardin, and I'm an engineering manager at Target Corporate in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I'm so excited to be here to talk about people first leadership. All right, so without further ado, let's get started. I think great leadership is so hard to analyze and can be really overwhelming because there's so many tips and books and articles and talks like this out there. And so problems can really arise when you try to memorize it all. You can't possibly reference them when you are having that really hard conversation in front of someone or just those day-to-day conversations. And so I think the great leaders really make it all look effortless, which only adds to our sense of mystery and frustration for those of us who are struggling to get better as leaders. And so today I do want to focus on just 5 ways that you can focus and think about as you're trying to practice people first leadership. And so the first one is to remove blockers that prevent people from making progress towards professional and personal goals. I honestly think this is one of our most important roles as a technical leader, and that is to really enable developers and the team to be as productive as possible. So for me, that means in one-on-ones, I'm collecting a list of things that I can help my team members with and not the other way around. And so by the end of the day, I have a list of things that I can help them with and that I can work through. So whether it's gathering information from other teams or finding new opportunities for them to grow, gaining experience in a particular area or technical skill set, maybe helping them navigate a hard conversation that they're preparing for. I've realized that it can honestly just be as simple as changing the way you phrase your questions in one-on-ones. So what can I help you with instead of, do you have an update on, X, Y, and Z status update? I also think this means doing the unglamorous work as a leader. And this is really the stuff that just needs to get done and isn't necessarily a growth opportunity for developers. So thinking about those easy tasks, like upgrading config settings, maybe updating some minor text in a user interface, or typing up and sending RCA notes that the team recently went through. There's those things that you can just pick up on behalf of the team to let them do more of the glamorous and exciting work. Also, with respect to removing blockers, let's make sure that we set up people right off the bat to be productive. I think that employee onboarding is going to make up new employees' first impression of your company and of your team, and so it's really that ideal place to start setting standards immediately. Because most people just want to get coding right away. And so in order to address some of these blockers before they even come up, let's make sure we have solid and well-documented onboarding processes. So a couple of tactical tips that I like to go through. Number one, discuss roles and responsibilities of both the new hire and yourself as the manager. Get that right off the bat. Just make sure they understand what you expect of them as an engineer on the team and vice versa. Also, make sure you're discussing the team ways of working. So does the team like to, work remote on certain days? Do you have certain hours that you're expected to be online or responding to customer questions? Make sure you're discussing those team ways of working right away. I also like to provide an overview of the team and the project and where it sits in an organization. So Target's a pretty large company, and so I like to say, here's our application, here are other applications that we interface with, and maybe some backend service teams that we frequently consume. Just start making those connections right off the bat. I also like to make sure I'm matching the new hire with a peer buddy and a mentor. And I think these roles are really important to make sure they are distinct and independent roles of different people. So the peer buddy is that person that individual can go to for any question. If they think they have, a dumb question or just not confident to ask in front of the group, they're that person they feel really comfortable going to. And then there's the technical mentor. So the mentor is the person who they might go to for, maybe a more complex story that they've picked up or task. Maybe the first person they go to ask for a pull request review. Just that person to bounce ideas off of and really learn from a technical standpoint. I also like to help the new hire build a social network. So providing a list of the people they should meet with. Again, who are those people on those other teams in tech that we can make sure that they're interacting with and building strong partnerships right away. Also, who are the leaders in the area that they just want to get in front of to talk about their background, et cetera, and what they want to, out of this team and out of this organization. I think that's really important just to help them by providing them a list of people to get to know right away. I also like to make sure that I'm asking the new hire what he or she prefers for a welcome celebration. So I've learned that not everyone really wants, a happy hour. Some people don't appreciate that environment. And so make sure you're asking what they prefer for their welcome celebration on your team, whether it's maybe just a casual team lunch or just donuts, or honestly, sometimes nothing. Sometimes you just want to get to work. Make sure you're asking the person what they prefer. The next thing to review is making sure that you have comprehensive developer onboarding tools in place. Like I said before, a lot of people just want to get coding right away. And so this really does mean speeding up the time it takes to onboard a new team member, and also limiting the amount of time your team spends searching for answers to technical problems. So for me, this means like, let's get their laptop set up. Let's make sure they have a laptop. Let's make sure we get the access request completed. You're hopefully having steps that they can walk through to get their development environment set up quickly. Hopefully you have diagrams of your application network architecture and the tech stack that your application resides on. Release processes. I know a lot of teams don't necessarily have these well documented, and it can be kind of an intimidating process to go through the first time. So making sure that you have that well documented, step by step, and also who to reach out and communicate to. So who are those key users who need to know when we're planning releases? And then lastly, just looking at all of those miscellaneous developer tools that seem obvious to the team now, but might be new to the new hire. So make sure you're walking through those as well. All right, so to wrap up the, addressing blockers, I like to say watch out for blockers in disguise. So a blocker can disguise itself as a dynamic amongst the team, or also through nonverbal communication. So if you can sense that there are issues, you must be the one to bring it up. And this is where that really strong interpersonal communication skills and, high emotional intelligence as a leader is really important. And also for this, you do have to be present. So sitting in on meetings, on stand-ups, being in that team area or virtual space when possible to observe these interactions is really, really vital as a leader. The next tip is to empower your team. And for me, this means, and this is really tough, but ensuring that decisions are made at the level where the best information is available. I like to walk through this old business term from the, I think 1989, a study that they did called the iceberg of ignorance. And it just goes to show that a lot of the actual day-to-day costly problems are not known to top level managers. And as you can imagine, this can be really expensive if those frontline employees, those developers, don't have opportunities to voice these problems. And so I want to talk about, how do we melt this iceberg metaphorically? I think the main thing is to honestly just be humble. And there's a couple different ways to do this as a leader on a technical team. The first thing is just really seeking to understand pain points. Don't assume they're going to come to you, with here's what's making my job the hardest right now. You have to ask the questions to get there. Maybe use it on anonymous pulse surveys if you want to try to get to answers there. Keep your office door open, or metaphorically, if you're a virtual team, make sure that you're just really accessible and approachable as a leader. Like I said before, you're hopefully sitting with the team, asking how you can help engineers do their jobs better, and then also doing stay interviews. So a lot of companies have the concept of exit interviews. When someone leaves the company, they want to ask, hey, what could we have done better? Like, what would have changed your decision to leave? And I would argue we should actually be doing this before someone decides to leave, so that they can, reap the benefits of the changes that we're making before they choose to leave an organization. And so tactically, in one-on-ones, you can even ask simply like, hey, if you were to leave tomorrow, what would be the main reason you would leave? And let's work to improve that experience for you. In general, when making decisions as a leader too, look at, who should be participating in making this decision, who's going to have to carry out the results of this decision, and also who is going to be impacted by this decision. I love this quote by Steve Jobs. It doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so that they can tell us what to do. And I completely agree with that. We hire amazing engineers to really think creatively, to build new innovative solutions to solve problems. And especially in technology, with new versions and frameworks and technologies always coming out, There's no way a technical manager can stay up to date on all of these. And so instead, we just have to trust the engineers that we've hired and involve them in making these decisions. Another thing I think is really important is to make sure you're waiting for conversations to play out as the leader of the technology team. And this is especially challenging for folks who were maybe recently lead engineers or senior engineers on that team, for folks who, the engineers are already going to if they know that they just know best and are always offering up solutions. But this is really important as the new manager, the new tech lead, to make sure that you aren't always the one to bring up the solution and instead wait for the team to come up with a solution themselves. There's a wonderful book called Multipliers by Liz Wiseman, and she talks about different types of leaders and how one is a lot more empowering over the other. And so the two different types of leaders are multipliers and diminishers. And so she says multipliers get a lot more from their people because they are leaders who look beyond their own genius and focus their energy on extracting and extending the genius of others instead of always being that leader to, be the one coming up with ideas, those diminishing types of leaders. Also related to empowerment, let's make sure that knowledge is spread across the team. So there shouldn't be any gatekeepers, even outside of yourself. There should be that one person who knows the deployment pipeline and that they're always the one to do production deployments. All of your architectural decisions should be really well documented. And everyone should participate in setting up all of our, development, DevOps tools, and like I said, development pipelines. Now, I do want to acknowledge that sometimes it is impossible to push things to the team. And as a leader here, I just think it's really, really vital that you're providing context, both to the team and to leaders. So an example of when you have to provide context to the team is, let's say we have to prioritize a business feature over some tech debt that we've really been wanting to work on. And so you just have to make sure you're gaining that context and also sharing that with the team. So, for example, hey, we have a rollout in stores that we just have to back into as this backend service team. And that's why we can't address this tech debt. Or on the other hand, if you need to provide this context to leaders and say something like, hey, we need to address this tech debt, it's going to improve performance, and here's why you should care about it. That's really, honestly, a really big role as a leader of a technical team as well, is to make sure you're providing context, both to your development team and to leadership. So if anything, it's really important to remember that context is huge to everyone. We are able to consume a lot of information and hear a lot of different data points that not everyone on the development team has access to. And so I like to make sure that I'm just over communicating to make sure everyone knows, why are we here and what are we working on? Number 3 is to share credit, take blame. And to me, this honestly means making sure that we're associating names with accomplishments. So people can often get lost when they are working on these really big initiatives, especially at large companies. And so make sure we're calling out the names of those folks who are working on these features that are enabling this, larger organizational initiative. So really make sure that you're associating actual names with those accomplishments. Another thing I've learned is that not all recognition looks the same. And so it's really important to make sure that we're getting to know the team members' personal preferences on how they prefer to be recognized. So I've learned the hard way that not everyone is comfortable, being recognized in front of a group of 100 people. And maybe they just prefer a direct message telling them, they did a great job and here's how their work impacted a larger organizational initiative. Now the take blame piece as a leader. We work in technology, things go wrong, we need to react to production issues and really take accountability for those things that do go wrong as a leader. And so for me, I found myself just making sure that I'm taking an active role in helping out the team when they're troubleshooting issues. And the first part of this, honestly, has just been making sure that we're shielding the team. So they're going to be bombarded with questions from, all over the place. So making sure that you can shield and communicate externally to help them troubleshoot faster. Also make sure you're participating in troubleshoot efforts. How can you help? What do you need? Sometimes it just means getting out of the way as a leader. But after, you've completed working through that production issue, you're leading the team through the RCA and then also implementing tools to prevent future occurrences and also sharing those ideas with other teams throughout the organization. And lastly, you're speaking on behalf of the team after major incidents. I love this tweet. The best measure of a leader is how much responsibility they take for the team's failures. And I think that's absolutely true. Number 4 is to never devalue people in the process of delivering a solution. So as leaders, obviously we care about and we're accountable for the results of our jobs and our development teams, but it's also our jobs to care about and enable them as people. And I've learned that when it comes to humans, abstraction is bad. We're not in assembly lines. And even those folks who are in assembly lines, what someone can produce and what someone is worth at work is a lot more complex than we can safely put numbers around. And so I truly believe that, value is described in so many different ways. And so I love this quote, tell me how you measure me, and I'm going to then tell you how I behave. So I'm going to work on those things that you are constantly talking about as a leader and incentivizing. It's really interesting to see how people notice what you focus on and what you give kudos to. So as a leader, make sure you're thinking about what are those expectations that you have for your team members. What are they incentivized by? What are you focusing on? Is it the number of code commits? Is it your test coverage percentage? Is it the number of stories they're completing? To me as a leader on my teams, I honestly think it's more about their ability to mentor others and expand their skills while also delivering value. And so those are the things I really like to talk about in our annual reviews and in our one-on-ones as important factors to me. It's also important as a leader that we're making sure that we're celebrating and also reaping the benefits of the unique characteristics of each individual on your team. There are so many different studies on diversity and how impactful and beneficial it is to organizations and to technical teams. If you're a numbers person, I have some stats. So 60% of job seekers consider diversity an important factor when choosing where to work, and more than 50% of people on teams want their teams to do more to increase diversity. Also, for results, they say that organizations with above average gender diversity and levels of employee engagement actually do outperform companies with below average diversity and engagement by 46 to 58%. And so as leaders, it's, just makes sense financially and for the productivity of the team that we can ensure employees are able to be their authentic selves every single day at work without questions. I've learned that, people are going to bring their whole human self to work every day, even if they try not to. And it can be so draining to spend your energy trying to hide an essential element of who you are. And so instead, I want them to spend that energy building awesome technology. And this is really where inclusion comes in. So making sure people feel like they can be their authentic selves at work on the teams that they're on. And so as a leader, you really have to make sure you're fostering inclusive cultures, cultures where someone can speak up and bring their concerns to you also if they feel their needs aren't being met. A quick tip I've learned, also find out what religious and cultural days and holidays are significant to people on your team. If possible, offer them time off, but just at a minimum, be aware of them and make sure you're not reaching out to them on those days off. All right, so I also like to talk about how a lack of diversity in our engineering teams has failed us in other ways. So from facial recognition software to crash tests, this lack of diversity even becomes deadly to some of our users. And I have a hypothesis for why this occurs. I think building software to solve a problem is really all about creativity. And I love this definition of creativity. Creativity is making unexpected connections between things that we already know. And so if our teams were made up of the exact same type of person with similar experiences and backgrounds, if we all had the same experiences, we wouldn't be able to come up with creative solutions. And so therefore, the quality of our software is affected directly by the degree of diversity on our engineering teams. And so that's why it's so important for many reasons to have a diverse and inclusive engineering team, both for the well-being of the other members of the team and of your users. My last tip is not as exciting, but I think it's really important to talk about the ability to prioritize and focus as a leader. Once you become a manager or a tech lead, you're going to need to welcome interruptions. In fact, they're always, and often quite just part of your job responsibilities. So between one-on-ones and meetings with other team and removing blockers, maybe you're still coding, it's really important that you find ways to cope with this and be as productive as possible. So looking at the experts of success in this space, when asked one word to define their success, both Bill Gates and Warren Buffett said focus. And I completely agree. I think, we are bombarded with so many distracting ideas and information and conversations all day. And the number one skill of leaders is the ability to know what really matters at any given moment and focus your limited time and energy on that. So whether it's that person who needs help that day, maybe it's a business partner who you need to strengthen a relationship with, figure out which meetings you should and shouldn't be involved in and make it a priority to work through those every single day. So to recap, I went through 5 different really quick tips for implementing people first leadership, and those were to remove blockers for your team. Make sure you're empowering your team. Share credit, take blame. Never devalue people in the process of delivering a solution, and make sure you're able to effectively prioritize and focus for your team. So I'm a strong believer that people are our most important assets. And so it's really important to be great leaders to make sure that we're tenaciously committed to the growth of each individual on our team. All right. Thank you so much for having me. I'll see you later.